Welcome to the 1,000 Nights and 1 Night. Now, when it was the 402nd night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the youth then betook himself to ask pardon of Allah, and to invoking prayer and praise upon the Apostle and the Lord of the Just, and repeating verses of the Quran, after which he recited these couplets. O sire, be not deceived by worldly joys, for life must pass, and joy must learn to mourn. When thou art told of folk in evil plight, think thou must answer for all hearts forlorn, and when thou bear thy dead toward the tombs, know thou wilt likewise on that way be borne." Continued Abu Amir the Basri. Now when the youth had ended his charge and his verses, I left him and went home. On the morrow I returned at the appointed hour, and found him indeed dead. The mercy of Allah be upon him. So I washed him and unsewn his gown, found in the bosom a ruby worth thousands of gold pieces, and said to myself, "By Allah, this youth was indeed weaned from worldly things." After I had him buried, I made way to Baghdad, and going to the Caliph's palace, waited till he came forth, when I addressed him in one of the streets, and gave him the ruby, which when he saw it he knew, and fell down in a fainting fit. His attendants laid hands on me, but he revived and said to them, "Release him." And when he returned, he sent for me, and carrying me into his chamber, said to me, "How doth the owner of this ruby?" Quoth I, "Verily, he is dead," and told him what had passed, whereupon he fell a-weeping and said, "The son hath gained, but the sire hath lost." Then he called out, saying, "Ho, such as one!" And behold, there came out to him a lady, who, when he saw me, would have withdrawn, but he cried to her, "Come," and mind him not. So she entered and saluted, and he threw her the ruby, which when she saw, she knew, and she shrieked a great shriek, and fell down in a swoon. As soon as she came to herself, she said, "O Commander of the Faithful, what hath Allah done with thy son?" And he said to me, "Do thou tell her this case," as he could not speak for weeping. Accordingly, I repeated the story to her, and she began to shed tears, and say in a faint and failing voice, "How I have longed for thy sight, O solace of mine eyes! Would I might have given thee to drink when thou hast none to slack thy thirst. Would I might have cheered thee when as thou foundest never a cheerer." And she poured forth tears and recited these couplets. I weep for one whose lot a lonely death befell, without a friend to whom he might complain and moan. And after glory and glad union with his friend, he woke desolation, friendless, lone, and lorn. What fortune hides a while, she soon to men shall show. Death never spared a man, no, not a single one. O absent one, my lord decreed thee strangerhood, far from thy nearest friends, and to long exile gone. Though death forbid my hope of meeting here again, on doomsday, tomorrow, we shall meet again, my son. Quoth I, "O Commander of the Faithful, was he indeed thy son?" Quoth he, "Yes. And indeed, before I succeeded to this offer, he was wont to visit the learned in the company with the devout. But when I became Caliph, he grew estranged from me and withdrew himself apart. Then I said to his mother, Verily, this thy son hath cut the world and devoted his life to Almighty Allah, and it be that hard times shall befall him, and he be smitten with trial of evil chance. Whereto, for give to him this ruby, which he may find useful in an hour of need." So she gave it to him, conjuring him to take it, and he obeyed her bidding. Then he left to us the things of our world, and removed himself from us, nor did he cease to be absent from us, till he went to the presence of Allah, to whom be honor and glory, pious and pure. Then said he, "Come, show me his grave." So I traveled with him to Basra, and showed him his son's grave, and when he saw it, he wept and lamented, till he fell down in a swoon, after which he recovered and asked pardon of the Lord, saying, "We are Allah's, and unto him we are returning," and invoked blessings on the dead. Then he asked me to become his companion, but I said to him, "O Commander of the Faithful, verily, in thy son's case is for me the most momentous of admonitions." And I recited these couplets. "'Tis I am the stranger visited by none. I am the stranger, though in town my own. 'Tis I am the stranger, I lacking kith and son, and friend to whom I mote for aidance run. I house in mosque, which are my only home. My heart there wones, and shall for never wone. Then Lodgy Allah, Lord of worlds, as long as soul and body dwell in union. And a famous tale is told of the unwise schoolmaster who fell in love by report. Quoth one of the learned, I passed once by a school wherein a schoolmaster was teaching children. So I entered, finding him a good-looking man and well-dressed. When he rose to me and made me sit with him, then I examined him in the Koran and the syntax and the prosody and the lexicography, and behold, he was perfect in all and required of him. So I said to him, Allah, strengthen thy purpose. Thou art indeed versed in all that is requisite. Thereafter I frequented him a while, discovering daily some new excellence in him, and quoth I to myself, This is indeed a wonder in any Dominie, for the wise are agreed upon a lack of wit in children's teachers. Then I separated myself from him, and sought him, and visited him only every few days, till coming to see him one day as of wont, I found the school shut, and made inquire of his neighbors, who replied, Someone is dead in his house. So I said in my mind, It behoveth me to pay him a visit of condolence. And going to his house, knocked at the door, when a slave girl came out to me and asked, What dost thou want? And I answered, I want thy master. She replied, He is sitting alone mourning. And I rejoined, Tell him that his friend so-and-so seeketh to console him. She went in and told him, and he said, Admit him. So she brought me into him, and I found him seated alone, and his head bound with mourning fillets. So I said to him, Allah requite thee amply. This is a path all must perforce tread, and it behoveth thee to take patience. Adding, But who is dead unto thee? He answered, One who was dearest of the folk to me, and blessed beloved. Perhaps thy father? No. Thy brother? No. One of thy kindred? No. Then asked I, What relation was dead to thee? And he answered, My lover. Quoth I to myself, This is the first proof to swear by of his lack of wit. So I said to him, Assuredly there be others than she and fairer. And he made answer, I never saw her, that I might judge whether or no there be others fairer than she. Quoth I to myself, This is another proof positive. Then I said to him, And how couldst thou fall in love with one that thou hast never seen? He replied, Know that I was sitting one day at the window, when lo, there passed by a man singing the following distich. Amir, thy boons allay repay, give back my heart, be where it may. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased saying her permitted say. Now, when it was the 403rd night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the schoolmaster continued. When I heard the man humming these words as he passed through the street, I said to myself, Except this Amru were without equal in the world, the poet has said, celebrated her in ode and canzon, so I fell in love with her. But 2 days after, the same man passed, singing the following couplet. Ass and Amr went their way, nor she nor ass returned for I. Thereupon I knew she was dead, and mourned for her. This was 3 days ago, and I have been mourning ever since. So I left him, and fared forth, having assured myself of the weakness of the gerund grinder's wit. And they tell another and a similar tale of the foolish Dominie. Once upon a time, a schoolmaster was visited by a man of letters who entered a school, and sitting down by the host's side, entered into discourse with him, and found him an accomplished theologian, a poet, a grammarian, a philosopher, a poet, intelligent, well-bred, pleasant-spoken. Whereat he wondered, saying in himself, It cannot be that a man who teaches children in a school should have perfect wit. Now, when he was about to go away, the pedant said to him, Thou art my guest tonight. And he consented to receive hospitality, and accompanied him to his house, where he made much of him, and set food before him. They ate, they drank, they sat talking, till a third of the night was past, when the host spread his guest a bed and went up to his harem. The stranger lay down and addressed himself to sleep, when behold, there rose a great clamor in the women's rooms. He asked what was the matter, and they said, "Oh, a terrible thing hath befallen the sheikh, and he is at his last gasp." Said he, "Take me up to him." So they took him up to the pedagogue, where he found him lying insensible with his blood streaming down. He sprinkled water on his face, and when he revived, he asked him, "What hath betided thee? When thou leftest me, thou wast in good cheer and whole body." And he answered, "O my brother, after I left thee, I sat meditating on the creative works of Almighty Allah, and said to myself, in everything the Lord hath created for man, there is an use. For he, to whom be glory, made the hands to seize, the feet to walk, the eyes to see, the ears to hear, and the penis to increase and multiply, and so on with all the members of the body, except these two bollocks. There is no use for them. So I took a razor I had by me, and I cut them off. And there befell me what thou seest." So the guest left him and went away, saying, "He was in the right who said, Verily, no schoolmaster who teacheth children can have perfect wit, though he know all the sciences." And they tell a pleasant tale of the illiterate who set up for a schoolmaster. There was once among the menials of a certain mosque a man who knew not how to write or even to read, and who gained his bread by gulling folk. One day it occurred to him to open a school and teach children. So he got together writing tablets and written papers and hung them up in high places. Then he greatened his turban and sat down at the door of the school. And when the people who passed by saw his huge headgear and tablets and scrolls, they thought he must be a very learned pedagogue. So they brought him their children, and he would say to them, "Write and do that, read," and thus the little ones taught one another. Now, one day, as he sat as of wont at the door of the school, behold, up came a woman, letter in hand, and he said in his mind, "This woman doubtless seeketh me that I may read her the missive she hath in her hand. How shall I do with her, seeing I cannot read writing?" And he would fain having gone down and fled from her. But before he could do this, she overtook him and said, "Whither away?" Quoth he, "I propose to pray the noon prayer and return." Quoth she, "Noon is yet distant, so read me this letter." He took the letter, and turning it upside down, fell to looking at it, now shaking his head till his turban quivered, then dancing his eyebrows, and anon showing anger and concern. Now the letter came from the woman's husband, who was absent, and when she saw the Dominie do all this wise, she said to herself, "Doubtless my husband is dead, and this learned doctor of law and religion is ashamed to tell me so." So she said to him, "O my lord, if he be dead, tell me." But he shook his head and held his peace. Then said she, "Shall I rent my raiment?" "Rend," replied him. "Shall I beat my face?" asked she. And he answered, "Beat." So she took the letter from his hand, and returning home fell a weeping, and her children. And presently one of her neighbors heard her sobbing, and asking what ailed her. "Of a truth, she hath gotten a letter telling her that her husband is dead." Quoth the man, "This is a falsehood, for I had the letter from him but yesterday, advising me that he is whole and in good health, and will be here within 10 days. So he rose forthright, and going in to her, said, "Where's the letter that came to thee?" She brought it to him, and took it and read it, and lo, it ran as follows: "After the usual salutations, I am well and in good health, and whole, and will be with you after 10 days. Meanwhile, I sent you a quilt and an extinguisher." So she took the letter, and returning with it to the schoolmaster, said to him, "What induced thee to deal thus with me?" And she repeated to him what her neighbor had told her of her husband's well-being, and of his having sent her a quilt and an extinguisher. Answered he, "Thou art in the right, O good woman, for I was at the time." And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 404th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the pedagogue replied, Verily, I was at that time fast and absent-minded, and seeing the extinguisher wrapped up in the quilt, I thought that he was dead, and they had shrouded him. The woman, not smoking the cheat, said, "Thou art excused," and taking the letter, went her way. And they relate a story of the king and the virtuous wife. A certain king once went forth in disguise to look into the affairs of his lieges. Presently he came to a great village, which he entered unattended, and being athirst, stopped at the door of the house and asked for water. There came out to him a fair woman with a gugglet, which she gave to him, and he drank. When he looked at her, he was ravished with her, and besought her favors. Now she knew him, so she led him into the house, and making him sit down, brought out a book, and said to him, "Look therein, whilst I order my affair, and return to thee." So he looked into the book, and behold, it treated of the divine prohibition against adultery, and of the punishment which Allah hath prepared for those who commit adulterous sin. When he read this, his flesh quaked, and his hair bristled, and he repented to Almighty Allah. Then he called the woman, giving her the book, and went away. Now her husband was absent, and when he returned, she told him what had passed, whereat he was confounded, and said to himself, "I fear lest the king's desires have fallen upon him." And he dared not to do with her and know her carnally after this. When some time had passed, the wife told her kinsfolk of her husband's conduct, and they complained of him to the king, saying, "Allah advance the king. This man hired of us a piece of land for tillage, and tilled it a while, then left it fallow, and neither tilled it nor forsook it, that we might let it to one who would till it. Indeed, harm has come to the field, and we fear its corruption, for such land as that, if it be not sown, spoileth." Quoth the king to the man, "What hindereth thee from sowing thy land?" Answered he, "Allah advance the king. It reached me that the lion entered the field, wherefore I stood in awe of him, and dared not draw near it, since knowing that I cannot cope with the lion, I stand in fear of him." The king understood the parable, and rejoined, saying, "O man, the lion trod and trampled not thy land, and it is good for seed. So do thou till it, and Allah prosper thee in it, for the lion hath done it no hurt." Then he gave the man and his wife a handsome present, and sent them away. And amongst the stories of that is Al-Rahman and the Maghribi story of the Rukh. There was once a man of the people of West Africa who had journeyed far and wide and traversed many a desert and a tide. He was once cast upon an island where he abode a long while, and returning thence to his native country, brought with him the quill of a wing feather of a young Rukh, whilst yet in the egg and unhatched. And this quill was big enough to hold a goat's skin of water, for it is said that the length of a Rukh chick's wing, when he come forth of the egg, is 1,000 fathoms. The folk marveled at this quill when they saw it, and the man, who called Abd al-Rahman the Moor, he was known to boot as the Chinaman for his long sojourn to Cathay, related to them the following adventure, one of many of his travelers' tales of marvel. He was on a journey in China seas, and Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 405th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Abd al-Rahman the Moorman, the Chinaman, was wont to tell wondrous tales, amongst which was the following. He was on a voyage to China seas with a company of merchants, when they sighted an island from afar. So they steered for it, and making fast thereto, saw that it was large and spacious. The ship's crew went ashore to get wood and water, taking with them hatchets and ropes and waterskins, the travelers accompanying them. And presently espied a great dome, white and gleaming, and 100 cubits long. So they made towards it, and drawing near, found that it was an egg of the Rukh, and fell on it with axes and stones and sticks, till they uncovered the young bird, and found the chick as it were a firm set hill. So they plucked out one of the wing feathers, but could not do so, save by helping one another, for all the quills were not full grown. After which they took what they could carry of the young bird's flesh, and cutting the quill away from the vein, returned to the ship. Then they set sail, and putting out to sea, voyaged with a fair wind all that night, till the sun rose, and while everything went well, they saw the Rukh come flying after them, as he were a vast cloud with a rock in its talons, like a great heap bigger than the ship. As soon as he posed himself in air over the vessel, he let fall the rock upon it. But the craft, having great way on her, out went the rock, which fell into the sea with a loud crash and horrible. So Allah decreed their deliverance and saved them from doom. And they cooked the young bird's flesh and ate it. Now there were amongst them an old white-bearded man. And when they awoke on the morning, they found that their beards had turned black, nor did any of them who had eaten of the young rooks grow gray ever again. Some said the cause of the return of youth to them and the ceasing of hoariness from them was that they had heated the pot with the arrowwood, whilst others would have come of eating the rook's chick flesh. And this is indeed a wonder of wonders. And the story is related of Adi Bin Zayd and the Princess Hind. Al-Nu'man bin al-Muzur, king of the Arabs of Iraq, had a daughter named Hind, who went out one Posh, which is a feast day of the Nazarenes, to the White Church to take the sacrament. She was 11 years old, and was the loveliest woman of her age and time. And it so chanced that on the same day came Hira, a young man called Adi Bin Zayd, with presents from the Khosrow to Al-Nu'man. And he also went to the White Church to communicate. He was tall of stature and fair of favor, with handsome eyes and smooth cheeks, and had with him a company of his people. Now there was with Hind bint al-Nu'man a slave girl named Maghribi, who was enamored of Adi, but had not been able to foregather with him. So when she saw him in the church, she said to Hind, "Look at yonder youth. By Allah, he is handsomer than all thou seest." Hind asked, "And who is he?" And Maghribi answered, "Adi Bin Zayd," quoth Al-Nu'man's daughter. "I fear lest he know me if I draw nearer to look on him." Quoth Maghribi, How should he know thee when he hath never seen thee?" So she drew near him and found him jesting with the youths his companions, and indeed he surpassed them all, not only in his personal charms, but in his excellence of speech, the eloquence of his tongue, and the richness of his raiment. When the princess saw him, she was ravished with him. Her reason was confounded, and her color changed. And Maghribi, seeing her inclination to him, said, "Speak to him." So she spoke to him and went away. Now, when he looked upon her and heard her speech, he was captivated by her, and his wit was dazed, his heart fluttered, and his color changed, so that his companions suspected him, and he whispered one of them and to follow her and find out who she was. The young man went after her, and returning informed him that she was Princess Hind, daughter of Al-Nu'man. So Adi left the church, knowing not whither he went for excess of love, and reciting these two couplets. "O friends of me, one favour more I pray, unto the convents find once more your way. Turn me that I so face the land of Hind, then go and fairest greetings for me say." Then he went to his lodging, and lay that night restless, and with appetite for food not, and no sleep. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. And so do I cease my tales for the day, until it be morrow.